She was screaming his name, but he was at a gala with another woman. In the world of the Blackwood Pack, power is everything, and weakness is a death sentence. When Serafina told Alpha King Dominic she was pregnant, she expected a celebration. Instead, she got silence. For 9 months, she was a ghost in her own castle, watching the man she loved parade his ex-girlfriend around while she carried his heir alone. But silence has a price. And when the monitors flatline and the doctors start shouting, Dominic is about to learn that being a king doesn't make you a god. And some mistakes can't be fixed with a crown. The rain in Seattle always felt personal to Serafina. It battered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Blackwood Manor, distorting the manicured gardens outside into a blur of grey and green. She stood there, her hand resting instinctively on her flat stomach, waiting. The grandfather clock in the hall chimed 7 times. Dominic was late. Again. Serafina wasn't just a random she-wolf. She was the fated mate of Dominic Blackwood, the Alpha King of the Western Coast. Their bond should have been the stuff of legends, a soul-deep connection that burned brighter than fire. But in reality, it felt more like a cold negotiation. Dominic hadn't wanted a mate. He had wanted a strategic alliance with the Northern Packs. When the Moon Goddess paired him with Serafina, the shy daughter of a disgraced beta, he had accepted it with the stoic resignation of a man accepting a prison sentence. The heavy oak doors creaked open. Serafina turned, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Dominic strode in. He was a mountain of a man, 6'4" of raw muscle and lethal grace, smelling of rain, expensive scotch, and her Isabel. Isabel was the Gamma's daughter, stunning, ambitious, and the woman Dominic had been sleeping with before the mating ball ruined his plans. "You summoned me?" Dominic's voice was a low rumble, devoid of warmth. He didn't look at her face. He looked at the paperwork on his desk, pulling a fountain pen from his breast pocket. Serafina took a shaky breath. "I didn't summon you, Dominic. I've been waiting for 3 hours. We need to talk." "I have a council meeting in 20 minutes, Serafina." "Make it quick." He finally looked up, his steel-grey eyes narrowing. "Is this about the budget for the Pack orphanage again? Because I told you, I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air, sucking the oxygen out of the massive study. The scratching of Dominic's pen stopped abruptly. For a second, Serafina hoped. She hoped to see his eyes widen, to see the alpha instinct kick in, to see him cross the room and pull her into his arms. Instead, Dominic slowly set the pen down. His expression didn't soften. It hardened into something brittle and cold. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Not is it mine? Not are you okay? Just a clinical inquiry into the validity of her claim." "Dr. Harrison confirmed it this morning. I'm 8 weeks along." Serafina's voice trembled, but she held her ground. "We're going to have a pup, Dominic. An heir." Dominic stood up and walked to the liquor cabinet, pouring himself a drink. He kept his back to her. "This is inconvenient timing." The words felt like a physical slap. Serafina stumbled back a step, gripping the back of a leather chair for support. "Inconvenient? Dominic, this is your child. Our child." He turned around, the glass of amber liquid swirling in his hand. "The Northern Alliance is fragile, Serafina. They view you as weak stock because of your father. A pregnancy now, before you've established your authority as Luna, will make you look vulnerable. They will circle like sharks." "I don't care about the politics," Serafina cried out, the first crack in her composure showing. "I care that my mate is looking at me like I'm a problem to be solved rather than his wife." Dominic slammed the glass down on the cabinet. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Everything is politics, Serafina. That is the burden of the crown you were so eager to wear." "I never asked for this crown," she whispered, tears stinging her eyes. "I just wanted you." "Well, you have me," he said coldly, checking his Rolex. "And now you have a pup. Go see Dr. Harrison. Get whatever vitamins you need. Tell the staff to move you to the ground floor if the stairs become an issue. But do not expect me to hold your hand while the pack is on the brink of war." He grabbed his jacket. "I have to go. Isabel has secured a meeting with the rogue leaders near the border. Don't wait up." He walked past her without touching her. The bond, that mystical tie that was supposed to make them inseparable, felt like a noose tightening around her neck. As the door clicked shut, leaving her alone in the dark, expansive office, Serafina sank to the floor. She pressed her hands to her stomach. "It's okay," she whispered to the nothingness. "I'll love you enough for both of us." But deep down, she knew that in the Blackwood pack, love wasn't enough to keep you alive. 5 months later, the silence had become a physical weight. Serafina was 7 months pregnant, and she had become a ghost in her own home. The Blackwood Manor was a sprawling estate of cold stone and colder servants. Most of the staff were loyal to Isabel, who had effectively positioned herself as the Alpha's right hand, and perhaps something more, while Serafina was confined to the West Wing. The narrative in the pack had been carefully curated by Isabel. The Luna is delicate. The Luna is unwell. The Luna cannot be disturbed. In reality, Serafina was trapped. She sat in the nursery she had decorated herself. Dominic hadn't set foot in the room once. Not when the crib arrived. Not when she painted the walls a soft sage green. The room was beautiful, filled with sunlight, but it felt sterile, like a museum exhibit rather than a home. Her ankles were swollen, and a dull, throbbing headache had settled behind her eyes for the last 3 days. "Dr. Harrison," Serafina said into her phone, her voice raspy. She was sitting on the floor, folding tiny onesies. "The headache is getting worse, and I'm seeing spots." On the other end of the line, the old pack doctor's voice was sharp with worry. "Serafina, I need you to come to the clinic immediately. Or I can come to you. Your blood pressure was borderline last week. This could be preeclampsia." "I can't drive," she admitted, shame coloring her tone. "Dominic had the keys taken. He said it was unsafe for me to be on the roads in my condition." "I'm calling Dominic," Harrison growled. "This is ridiculous." "No," Serafina panicked. "He's in a strategy meeting with the elders. If you interrupt him for my headache, he'll just say I'm being dramatic. Isabel told him last week that I was faking pains to get his attention." "To hell with Isabel," Harrison snapped. "I'm coming over, stay put." Serafina hung up and tried to stand, but a wave of dizziness washed over her. She gripped the edge of the crib, her knuckles turning white. The room tilted. Just then, the door opened. It wasn't Dr. Harrison. It was Isabel. She looked immaculate in a tailored black suit, her hair sleek and glossy. She scanned the nursery with a look of mild distaste, her eyes landing on Serafina's swollen form. "Dominic asked me to check on you," Isabel lied smoothly. The scent of her perfume, jasmine and musk, was overpowering. It was the same scent that clung to Dominic's shirts when he came home late. "I need a doctor, Isabel," Serafina managed to say, leaning heavily against the crib. "Something is wrong." Isabel laughed softly, a tinkling, cruel sound. "Oh, honey, you're always needing something, aren't you? First it was attention, then it was a new room, now it's a doctor for a little headache. Pregnancy isn't a disease, Serafina. Stop acting like an invalid." "My vision is blurry," Serafina pleaded, the room spinning faster. "Please, call Dominic." Isabel walked over, inspecting a plush bear on the shelf. "Dominic is busy handling a border dispute. He specifically told me not to let you disturb him unless the baby was actually coming out. He's tired of your neediness, Serafina. Everyone is." She leaned in close, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Do you know what the pack says about you? They say you're a weak vessel. They bet the pup won't even survive because you're too pathetic to carry an alpha's blood." The stress hit Serafina like a physical blow. Her heart rate spiked, thumping erratically against her ribs. The headache sharpened into a blinding spike of pain. "Get out!" Serafina gasped. "Gladly," Isabel smirked. She turned and walked to the door. "Oh, and Dr. Harrison called the gate. I told security to turn him away. We can't have you embarrassed by making a scene over nothing." "No!" Serafina lunged forward, but her legs gave out. She crashed to the floor. The impact was hard. Pain exploded in her abdomen. Not the dull ache of the headache, but a sharp, tearing sensation. Lower down. "Isabel!" she screamed, clutching her belly. Isabel paused at the doorway. She looked back, seeing Serafina on the floor, gasping for air. For a second, hesitation flickered in her eyes. But then she thought of Dominic. She thought of the lunar position that should have been hers. Isabel's face went blank. "I didn't hear anything," she muttered to herself. She stepped out into the hallway and closed the door. The click of the lock engaging echoed through the silent nursery. Inside, Serafina dragged herself across the carpet, her vision tunneling into darkness. She reached for her phone, which had skittered under the crib, but her fingers were numb. The pain was consuming her. "Dominic!" she called out through the mind link, a desperate mental scream that used the last shreds of her energy. "Dominic, help me." But the other end of the link was silent. He had blocked her. He had actually blocked his pregnant mate to focus on a meeting. As the darkness swallowed her, Serafina felt a warm, sticky liquid soaking through her dress. She wasn't due for another 2 months. "Not yet," she wept into the carpet, curling around her stomach. "Please, not yet." Dr. Thomas Harrison was not a man easily rattled. He had delivered 3 generations of Blackwood alphas and stitched up more warriors than he could count. But as he stood outside the wrought-iron gates of the manor, rain streaming down his trench coat, a cold knot of dread tightened in his gut. "I'm telling you, Dr. Harrison," the young guard, a boy named Caleb, stammered through the intercom. "The king is in a closed session, and Miss Isabel gave strict orders. No visitors for the Luna. She's resting." "Resting?" Harrison barked, his voice grappling with the thunder overhead. "I was on the phone with her, Caleb. She wasn't resting. She was disoriented. She was slurring her words. Open this damn gate before I drive my truck through it." I can't, sir. I'll lose my job." Harrison slammed his hand against the steering wheel. He rolled down his window and inhaled deeply, letting his wolf senses take over. The rain usually washed away scents, but the wind was blowing from the direction of the manor. He expected the scent of rain, pine, and perhaps the faint, milky scent of a pregnant mother. Instead, he smelled it. Sharp, metallic, cloying. Blood. It was faint, buried under the storm, but to a doctor's nose it was as loud as a siren. "Caleb!" Harrison roared, his eyes flashing a beta gold. "I smell blood. Open the gate now, or I will have you executed for treason against the crown." The threat of treason shattered the guard's resolve. The heavy gates groaned open. Harrison didn't wait for them to fully retract. He gunned the engine of his old Rover, scraping the paint as he squeezed through and sped up the winding driveway. He didn't park. He skidded to a halt at the front steps, leaving the door open as he sprinted into the foyer. The house was quiet. Too quiet. "Serafina!" he bellowed. A maid, terrifyingly young, scurried out of the kitchen, looking pale. "Dr. Harrison, you shouldn't be here. Where is she?" Harrison grabbed the maid's shoulder, not gently. "Where is the Luna?" She's in the nursery," the maid whispered, her eyes darting toward the stairs. "Ms. Isabel said she locked herself in to sulk." Locked herself in? Harrison's blood ran cold. He took the stairs 2 at a time, ignoring the protest of his arthritic knees. When he reached the nursery door in the west wing, the scent of blood was no longer faint. It was overwhelming. It seeped from beneath the door, mixing with the smell of unparalleled distress, the pheromones of a wolf in mortal terror. He tried the handle. Locked. "Serafina, can you hear me?" Silence. Harrison didn't hesitate. He stepped back and threw his shoulder against the door. It held. He was a doctor, not a warrior, but adrenaline was a potent fuel. He kicked near the lock, channeling every ounce of his strength. Wood splintered. One more kick, and the door flew open, banging against the wall. The sight that greeted him would haunt him for the rest of his life. The beautiful sage-green nursery looked like a crime scene. Serafina was curled in a fetal position on the rug in the center of the room. Her skin was a translucent grey, her lips blue. But it was the blood that stopped Harrison's heart. It soaked her dress, the rug, pooling dark and thick around her legs. "Goddess have mercy," Harrison whispered. He fell to his knees beside her, his hands instantly checking for a pulse. It was there, thready, erratic, fluttering like a dying bird's wings. "Serafina," he said, his voice shaking as he checked her pupils. They were blown wide, unresponsive. She murmured something, delirious. "Dominic. He's coming. He promised." Harrison felt a rage so pure it nearly blinded him. He looked at the phone lying just out of her reach under the crib. He snatched it up. The screen showed a single outgoing call to Dominic Blackwood. Duration, 0 seconds. Status, blocked. "He's not coming, child," Harrison gritted out, tears mixing with the rain on his face. "But I am." He scooped her up. She was terrifyingly light, her weight mostly the swell of her stomach. As he lifted her, her head lolled back limply. "Stay with me, Serafina. Stay with the pup." He carried her out of the room, his boots leaving bloody footprints on the pristine hallway carpet. As he reached the top of the stairs, Isabel stepped out of the library on the ground floor, holding a glass of wine. She looked up, and for a fraction of a second, the mask slipped. Pure, unadulterated shock crossed her face. Not that Serafina was hurt, but that Harrison had found her. "What do you think you're doing?" Isabel demanded, though her voice wavered as she saw the blood soaking Harrison's coat. "Put her down. You're ruining the carpet." Harrison didn't stop. He descended the stairs like a man possessed. When he reached the bottom, he paused only inches from Isabel. "If she dies," Harrison whispered, his voice low and lethal, "I will rip your throat out with my own teeth. Beta lineage or not." Isabel took a step back, pale. I didn't know." "You locked the door," Harrison snarled. He didn't wait for her defense. He kicked the front door open and carried the unconscious queen into the rain. He placed her in the back seat of his Rover, stripping off his coat to create a makeshift pillow. He jumped into the driver's seat, grabbed his radio, and keyed the emergency channel, the one that broadcasted to every warrior, patrol unit, and the Alpha himself. "This is Dr. Harrison. Code Red. I repeat, Code Red. The Luna is critical. Massive hemorrhaging. Placental abruption. I am en route to the Pack Hospital. Prep OR 1 immediately. Get the neonatal team on standby. If you aren't scrubbing in, get the hell out of my way." He slammed the car into gear. The silence on the radio was deafening, and then, finally, a voice crackled through. It wasn't Dominic. It was the head nurse. "We're ready, Doctor. Hurry!" The pack council room was soundproofed, designed to keep secrets in and distractions out. The air was thick with cigar smoke and the drone of the Northern Ambassador droning on about trade routes for timber. Alpha King Dominic Blackwood sat at the head of the mahogany table, his face a mask of bored authority. He swirled the whiskey in his glass, his mind drifting. He was annoyed. He had felt something. A phantom pain in his abdomen about 20 minutes ago, followed by a wave of dizziness. But he had pushed it aside, attributing it to the stress of the negotiations. He had blocked his bond with Serafina hours ago to stop her anxiety from bleeding into his mood. "She's probably crying over the nursery paint color," he told himself, justifying the cruelty. "She needs to toughen up. A queen doesn't need constant reassurance. The heavy oak doors of the council room were not meant to be opened during a session. They were guarded by 2 enforcers. So, when the doors didn't just open, but crashed inward with the force of a battering ram, the entire room jumped. Dominic stood up, a growl building in his chest. "Who dares interrupt?" The growl died in his throat. Standing in the doorway was Dr. Harrison. The elderly man looked like he had walked through a slaughterhouse. His white shirt was saturated in red. His hands were stained crimson up to the elbows. He was breathing hard, his chest heaving. The room went deathly silent. The Northern Ambassador dropped his pen. "Harrison?" Dominic asked, confusion warring with a sudden, icy spike of fear. What happened? Was there a rogue attack? Harrison didn't speak immediately. He walked into the room, ignoring the shocked gasps of the council members. He walked straight up to the Alpha King, leaving a trail of red droplets on the polished floor. He stopped at the head of the table. "No rogues, my king," Harrison said, his voice devoid of respect, dripping with venom. "Just you." "Watch your tone," Dominic snapped, though his hands began to tremble. "Whose blood is that?" Harrison slammed his hands down on the table. The wet slap of blood against the wood made the Gamma flinch. "It's your wife's blood, Dominic. It's your son's blood." The world tilted on its axis. Dominic stared at the red stains. "What?" "She has been calling you," Harrison shouted, his composure finally shattering. "She was dying on the floor of the nursery for hours. She tried to link you. She tried to call you, but you were too busy playing king to answer your mate." Dominic felt the blood drain from his face. I didn't know. I blocked. You blocked her," Harrison finished, spitting the words. "And because you blocked her, because you ignored her, because your mistress locked her in a room like a prisoner, Serafina has suffered a complete placental abruption. She is bleeding out on my operating table right now." Dominic staggered back, as if he'd been punched. The whiskey glass fell from his hand, shattering on the floor. "Isabel, locked her in?" Dominic whispered. "Get to the hospital," Harrison commanded, turning his back on the Alpha. "If you want to say goodbye." Dominic didn't think. He didn't issue orders to the council. He didn't dismiss the meeting. He simply vanished. He shifted mid-stride, his clothes shredding as his massive black wolf burst forth. He didn't bother with the doors. He launched himself through the floor-to-ceiling window, shattering the glass and plummeting 2 stories to the garden below. He landed running. He ran faster than he had ever run in his life. He pushed his muscles to the tearing point, his paws tearing up the earth. "Serafina!" he screamed into the mind link. "Serafina, answer me!" He slammed against the mental wall he had erected. With a savage mental claw, he tore the barrier down. He expected to be hit by her fear, her pain, her panic. He was met with nothing. Silence. A terrifying, hollow silence, where her bright, warm presence used to be. The bond was there, but it was faint, vibrating like a plucked string on a broken instrument. No, no, no. He reached the hospital in minutes, shifting back to human form as he crashed through the emergency doors. He was naked, bleeding from the glass cuts, but he didn't care. "Where is she?" he roared at the receptionist. "Or one. Alpha, but you can't—" He shoved past the security doors. He could smell it here too, the scent of her blood. It was everywhere. It overpowered the antiseptic. He reached the double doors of the operating room. The in-use light was glaring red. Dominic burst through. The scene was chaotic. 6 nurses and 2 doctors were swarming around the table. Machines were screaming. There was so much blood. The sheets were soaked. Harrison was there, his hands deep inside Dominic's wife. "Get him out!" Harrison yelled without looking up. "I need focus." "She's my mate!" Dominic screamed, his knees buckling as he saw Serafina's face. She was intubated, a tube taped to her mouth, her eyes taped shut. She looked like a corpse already. "BP is dropping, 60/40, a nurse shouted. "We have to get the baby out now, or we lose them both," Harrison yelled. "Scalpel!" Dominic was frozen. He stood by the door, a titan of power rendered utterly helpless. He watched as Harrison made the incision. There was no finesse, just a desperate race against time. "Uterus is open." Harrison reached in. A moment later, he pulled out a small, limp body. Dominic's heir. His son. The baby was purple. Silent. Still. "Cord is wrapped," Harrison barked. He cut the cord and handed the infant to the neonatal team. "Take him, go!" They whisked the baby to the warmer in the corner. Dominic watched, torn between the woman dying on the table and the silent child in the corner. "Come on, little one," the nurse over the warmer pleaded. "Breathe." Dominic stumbled toward the table. He grabbed Serafina's limp hand. It was ice cold. "Serafina!" he choked out, tears streaming down his face, mixing with the sweat and dirt. "I'm here. I'm listening now. Please, baby, I'm listening. She's crashing," the anesthesiologist yelled. "Vifib!" The heart monitor's erratic beeping changed tone. "Beep!" The sound was a flat, singular note that seemed to stretch into eternity. "No!" Dominic screamed. "Start it! Start her heart!" "Clear!" Harrison yelled, charging the paddles. Dominic was shoved back by a nurse. "Alpha, you have to move!" "Don't you dare let her die!" Dominic howled, the sound ripping from his throat, more animal than man. "Serafina!" Thump. Her body jerked on the table as the electricity hit her. The monitor remained a flat line. In the corner, the baby remained silent. Dominic Blackwood, the Alpha King who commanded armies and ruled the western coast, fell to his knees on the bloody tile floor, clutching his mate's cold hand, and realized that his silence had cost him everything. The sound of a flatline is not just a noise. It is a presence. It filled the operating room, sucking the air from Dominic's lungs, pressing down on his chest with the weight of a collapsing mountain. "Beep! Charge to 200!" Dr. Harrison roared, his voice cracking. He was sweating profusely, the perspiration mixing with the blood on his forehead. "Clear." Thump. Serafina's body arched off the table, a violent, unnatural motion. She flopped back down, limp as a rag doll. Dominic flinched, his wolf howling in the back of his mind, a sound of pure, unadulterated grief. He watched the monitor. The green line remained flat. "Again!" Harrison screamed. "Epi! Push 1 milligram of epinephrine, now!" A nurse scrambled, injecting the fluid into the IV line. In the corner, the silence from the neonatal warmer was just as deafening. The pediatric team was huddled over the tiny purple form of Dominic's son. They were working with frantic, hushed intensity. "Heart rate is 40, a doctor whispered over the baby. "He's not oxygenating. Come on, little guy, come on." Dominic felt his knees hit the floor again. He couldn't look at the baby. He couldn't look at the ruin of his wife. He pressed his forehead against the cold, blood-slicked tiles and did the only thing he had left. He prayed. Dominic Blackwood, the alpha who knelt for no one, pressed his face into the dirt and begged. "Take me," he pleaded to the moon goddess. "Take the crown. Take the pack. Take my life. Just give her back to me. Don't let the last thing she heard be my silence. Don't let the last thing she felt be my rejection. Charge to 300, clear!" Thump. Dominic squeezed his eyes shut. And then a sound. It was small at first, a wet, gargling cough from the corner of the room. Then a gasp. Then a thin, high-pitched wail that sliced through the mechanical drone of the flatline. "He's breathing!" the pediatrician cried out, her voice trembling with relief. "We have a cry. Heart rate is rising. 100, 120. The baby screamed, a sound of life and fury. Dominic's head snapped up. His son was alive, but the monitor above Serafina was still screaming death. "She's not coming back, doctor," the anesthesiologist said, his voice quiet, resigned. "It's been 3 minutes of asystole. She's gone." "Shut up!" Harrison snarled. He climbed onto a stool, positioning himself directly over Serafina's chest, and began manual compressions. He pumped hard, cracking ribs. "I delivered this girl. I am not letting her die on this table because of a locked door. Come on, Serafina, fight!" Dominic crawled toward the table. He reached up and grabbed Serafina's hand. It was terrifyingly still. He closed his eyes and shoved his energy, his alpha power, down the bond. Usually, this was forbidden. Forcing energy into a dying wolf could kill them faster. But the bond was shattered, fraying at the edges. "Serafina!" he roared into the void of her mind. "I order you to return. You are the Luna of the Blackwood Pack. You do not have permission to leave." He poured his strength into her, feeling his own life force draining away, feeding the connection. He felt cold. He felt empty. "Come back to our son. Come back and hate me. Just come back." "Stop compressions," the anesthesiologist said. "Check rhythm." Harrison stopped, panting, his hands hovering over her chest. Everyone looked at the monitor. Silence. And then a blip, a jagged, weak, uneven mountain on the green line. Beep. Pause. Beep. "Sinus rhythm," the nurse gasped, tears streaming down her face behind her mask. "We have a pulse. It's weak, but it's there." Harrison slumped over Serafina's body, his forehead resting on her shoulder. He let out a long, shuddering breath. "Stabilize her. Get the blood transfusions running wide open. She's lost half her volume." He looked up, his eyes locking with Dominic's. There was no triumph in the old doctor's gaze, only a deep, simmering fury. "She is alive, Alpha," Harrison said, his voice flat. "But do not mistake this for a victory. She has been without oxygen for a long time. Now get out." "I'm not leaving her," Dominic whispered, gripping her hand. "You are a contagion in this room," Harrison snapped, stepping down and ripping his gloves off. "You are covered in dirt and glass. You are distressing my staff, and frankly, looking at you makes me want to vomit. Go to the waiting room. If she survives the next hour, I will tell you." Dominic looked at his wife one last time. She was pale as marble, tubes snaked down her throat, wires taped to her chest. She looked like a broken doll. He stood up, his legs shaking, and backed out of the room. As the doors swung shut, the last thing he heard was the steady, rhythmic crying of the son he hadn't yet named. The hallway outside the operating room was stark white, smelling of bleach and old coffee. Dominic sat on a plastic chair, staring at his hands. The blood had dried. It was crusted under his fingernails, dark and flaky on his skin. He refused to wash it off. He felt that if he washed it off, he was erasing the evidence of his crime. "Dominic!" The voice was rough, familiar. Dominic looked up to see Elias, his beta and oldest friend. Elias looked horrified. He was staring at the blood on Dominic's chest, at the shreds of the tuxedo shirt still clinging to him. "Is it true?" Elias asked, his voice low. "The chatter on the comms. They're saying the Queen. She flatlined," Dominic said. His voice sounded like it was coming from someone else. It was hollow, scraping like gravel. "They got her back." "Barely." Elias sank into the chair opposite him. "How? How did this happen?" "I thought she was just resting in the West Wing." "She was," Dominic said. He looked at the ceiling, fighting the sting of tears. "She was dying in the West Wing, Elias, and I was drinking scotch and complaining about trade routes. The elevator doors at the end of the hall dinged. The click-clack of high heels echoed on the linoleum, fast, frantic steps. Dominic didn't need to look to know who it was. The scent of jasmine and musk arrived before she did. Isabel rushed toward them. She had changed out of her suit into a seemingly modest dress, her face scrubbed of makeup to look distraught. She was holding a handkerchief. "Dominic!" she cried out, rushing toward him. "Oh, goddess! I came as soon as I heard. The guards said... They said Serafina collapsed." She reached for him, her hands aiming for his face. "You look terrible. You're bleeding. Let me help you." Dominic didn't move fast. He didn't shift. He simply reached out and caught her wrist. His grip was not gentle. It was the grip of a vice. Isabel gasped, her eyes widening. "Dominic, you're hurting me." "Sit," Dominic said. He stood up slowly, still holding her wrist, and forced her into the chair he had just vacated. He towered over her, a ruin of a man, radiating an aura so dark and suffocating that the lights in the hallway flickered. "Where were you, Isabel?" he asked softly. Isabel swallowed hard, her eyes darting to Elias, then back to Dominic. I was in the library, reading. I didn't know anything was wrong until I saw Dr. Harrison run in like a madman." "The library," Dominic repeated. "The library is directly below the nursery." "Yes," Isabel nodded, trying to pull her wrist free. He didn't let go. "Harrison found her in a pool of blood," Dominic said, his voice rising slightly. "He said the door was locked. From the outside." Isabel's heart rate spiked. Dominic could hear it. Thump, thump, thump. It was the rhythm of a lyre. "The wind. Maybe the wind slammed it shut?" Isabel stammered. "You know how drafty the manor is." "Dominic, why are you looking at me like that?" "I'm your Gamma's daughter." "I'm your friend." "Serafina called me," Dominic continued, ignoring her excuses. "She tried to mind-link me. I had blocked her. But she had her phone. She called Harrison. She was screaming for help." He leaned down, bringing his face inches from hers. He smelled the fear on her now. It smelled sour. "The floorboards in the nursery are thin, Isabel. If she fell, if she screamed, you would have heard it in the library." "I didn't," Isabel cried, a tear leaking out. "I swear, Dominic, I had headphones on. I was working on the charity gala plans. For the pack." Dominic released her wrist. Isabel rubbed the red marks, looking relieved, thinking she had talked her way out of it. "Elias," Dominic said, not looking away from Isabel. "Yes, Alpha?" "Go to the manor. Pull the security logs from the internal cameras in the hallway outside the nursery. I want to know who locked that door, and I want to know exactly what time Isabel entered the library." Isabel's face went phantom white. "Dominic, that's not necessary." "Go!" Dominic roared. Elias scrambled up and ran for the elevators. Dominic looked back at Isabel. She was trembling now, the mask of the concerned friend crumbling to reveal the ambitious, cruel woman beneath. "You wanted her gone," Dominic stated. It wasn't a question. "You thought if the baby died, or if she died, I would come back to you. You thought you could be Luna." "She wasn't right for you," Isabel hissed, her desperation making her reckless. "She was weak. She was a beta's daughter with no spine. I watched you, Dominic. You were miserable with her. I did it for you. I did it for the pack." The confession hung in the air. Dominic felt a calm settle over him. It was the terrifying calm of a predator that has cornered its prey. "You left my mate and my unborn child to die," he whispered. "For me?" "Yes." Isabel reached for him again. "We can fix this. We can—" Dominic's hand shot out and wrapped around her throat. He lifted her off the chair, pinning her against the wall. Her feet dangled inches off the ground. She clawed at his arm, choking, her eyes bulging. "You are not a wolf," Dominic snarled, his eyes bleeding into deep alpha black. "You are a monster." "Nick," she gurgled. "I should kill you," he said, tightening his grip. "I should rip your head off right here in this hallway." The elevator dinged again. Dr. Harrison stepped out. He saw the Alpha King strangling the Gamma's daughter and didn't even blink. "Drop her, Dominic," Harrison said wearily. "She's not worth the stain on the floor." Dominic held her for a second longer, feeling her life pulse under his thumb. He wanted to end it. He wanted to make someone else feel the pain he was feeling, but he let go. Isabel crumpled to the floor, gasping for air, coughing violently. "Guards!" Dominic barked. 2 pack warriors stationed at the end of the hall ran forward. "Take her to the cells," Dominic ordered. "Silver chains, no visitors, no food until I say so. If she speaks, gag her." "Dominic, please," Isabel rasped as the guards hauled her up by her arms. "I love you." "Get her out of my sight," Dominic said, turning his back on her. As Isabel's screams faded into the elevator, Dominic turned to Harrison. The doctor looked older than he had an hour ago. He had changed his scrubs, but he looked exhausted. "Tell me," Dominic said. Harrison sighed, leaning against the wall. "The pup is stable. He's in the NICU. He's small, and his lungs are underdeveloped, but he's a fighter. He has your stubbornness." "And Serafina?" Harrison hesitated. That hesitation was a knife in Dominic's gut. "We stopped the bleeding. We stitched the uterus. But Dominic, she was without oxygen for several minutes before we got her heart started again." "What does that mean?" Dominic asked, his voice shaking. "It means she is in a coma," Harrison said softly. "Her body is alive, but her brain activity is minimal. We call it the black sleep. Wolves usually heal, but the brain is different." "Will she wake up?" Harrison looked him in the eye. "I don't know. If the bond is silent, Dominic, if you can't feel her—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. "She's trapped in the dark," Dominic whispered. "Yes," Harrison nodded. "She's trapped, and right now, you are the only one who can try to find her. But looking at the damage, you might be waiting a long time." Dominic looked at the double doors of the ICU where they had moved her. "I'll wait," Dominic said, the first tear of the night finally falling. "I'll wait forever." The passage of time in the Pack Hospital was not measured in hours or minutes, but in the slow, agonizing drip of an IV bag and the rhythmic beep of a heart monitor. Outside the frosted glass of room 402, the world had moved on. The relentless autumn rains of Seattle had frozen into a bitter winter, covering the Blackwood territory in a shroud of white snow. Then the snow had melted, giving way to the tentative pale green buds of early spring. 6 weeks, 42 days, 1,008 hours. That was how long Seraphina had been lost in the black sleep. Dominic Blackwood, the Alpha King who once made entire councils tremble with a single glance, had been reduced to a ghost haunting the corner of a hospital room. He was unrecognizable. The bespoke Italian suits were gone, replaced by worn denim and wrinkled t-shirts. His jaw, usually clean-shaven, was hidden beneath a thick, unkempt beard. Dark circles bruised the skin under his eyes that had lost their steel-grey arrogance and were now filled only with a hollow, vibrating fear. He ran the most powerful pack on the West Coast from a cramped, uncomfortable armchair next to her bed. His laptop sat open on a side table, glowing with unread treaties and urgent emails from the elders. But Dominic barely looked at them. His gaze was fixed solely on the woman in the bed. Seraphina looked fragile, her skin possessing a translucent, porcelain quality that terrified him. The tubes had been removed from her throat weeks ago, replaced by a simple nasal cannula, but she remained motionless. It was a stillness that felt unnatural for a wolf, a stillness that smelled of the void. "You're missing the sunrise, Sarah," Dominic whispered, his voice rough like gravel grinding together. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped so tightly the knuckles were white. "The rhododendrons are blooming in the garden. You said you wanted to paint the nursery that shade of pink. I had the gardeners plant more yesterday. Hundreds of them." There was no response, just the mechanical hiss of the oxygen and the hum of the heater. A soft, gurgling sound broke the silence. Dominic turned his head toward the bassinet, placed strictly within Seraphina's scent range. Inside lay the only reason Dominic hadn't thrown himself off a cliff: Lucas. The pup was 6 weeks old now. He was growing at an accelerated rate, his alpha genetics already demanding fuel and space. He had a mop of dark hair like Dominic, but his chin was all Seraphina. Dominic stood up, his joints popping, and walked over to the bassinet. He reached down, his large, calloused hands trembling slightly as he lifted his son. Lucas was heavy, warm, and smelled of milk and innocence, a sharp contrast to the antiseptic scent of the hospital. "Hey, little warrior," Dominic murmured, cradling the boy against his chest. "Are you hungry again? You have your mother's appetite." Lucas didn't want to be soothed. He squirmed, his tiny face scrunching up, turning a deep shade of red. He let out a whimper, which quickly escalated into a full-blown, lung-shattering wail. "Shh, shh," Dominic rocked him, pacing the small room. "It's okay. I'm here." But Lucas wouldn't settle. The baby's cry was high-pitched, distressed, a primal sound of need that bounced off the tiled walls. Dominic turned to walk out of the room to call a nurse for a bottle, but something stopped him. A feeling, a disturbance in the air. He froze, his back to the bed. Behind him, the rhythm of the heart monitor changed. Beep, beep, beep. It sped up. Beep, 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 beep. Dominic spun around, his heart leaping into his throat. On the bed, Seraphina's hand, the one that had been limp for 42 days, twitched. Her fingers curled into the bedsheet, gripping the fabric. "Sarah?" Dominic breathed, the name catching in his throat. He rushed to the bedside, holding the crying baby in one arm. He watched, terrified to hope, as a frown creased Seraphina's forehead. It was a look of immense concentration, a struggle against a heavy, drowning weight. She took a sharp, gasping breath, her chest heaving upward. The baby's cry seemed to be the tether pulling her back from the darkness. It was the anchor. Slowly, agonizingly, her eyelids fluttered. They were heavy, sticky with sleep, but they lifted. Dominic felt his knees give out. He sat heavily on the edge of the mattress, disregarding all hospital protocols. "Serafina," he choked out, tears instantly spilling over his lashes, tracking through the dirt on his cheeks. "Come back to us." Her eyes opened fully. They were the same warm hazel he had dreamed of every night, but they were clouded, unfocused, swimming in confusion. She blinked rapidly, wincing at the harsh fluorescent light above. Her gaze darted around the room wildly, panic setting in as her brain tried to reconcile the gap in her memory. Then, her eyes locked onto the source of the noise. She looked at the bundle in Dominic's arms. Bah! Her voice was a ruin. It was a dry, rasping croak, unused and broken. She coughed weakly, her throat working to form the words. "Baby." "He's here," Dominic wept, shifting Lucas so she could see him clearly. "He's right here, Serafina, our son. Lucas, you saved him." The mention of the name seemed to center her. Serafina's trembling hand lifted from the sheets. It moved with excruciating slowness, fighting gravity, until her fingers brushed the soft cheek of the infant. At her touch, Lucas stopped crying, instantly. The baby leaned into her hand, inhaling the scent of his mother, a scent he had known from the womb. "Mine," she whispered, a tear leaking from the corner of her eye and sliding into her hairline. "Yes," Dominic sobbed, leaning forward. "He is yours, and I am yours." Overwhelmed by relief, Dominic did what any mate would do. He reached out with his free hand and covered hers, pressing her palm against his cheek. He closed his eyes and pushed his soul toward her. He reached for the bond, that mystical, golden thread that connected fated mates. He pushed his love, his regret, his alpha strength, and his gratitude down the line. He wanted to flood her with his emotions, to show her without words how sorry he was, to let her feel the depth of his repentance. "Feel me, Serafina," he projected with all his might. "I am here. I am listening. I will never close the door again." He waited for the spark. He waited for the familiar warmth, the hum of her wolf responding to his, even if it was weak, even if it was angry. He waited and waited. There was nothing. It wasn't just quiet. It wasn't just suppressed. It was absent. Dominic opened his eyes, a cold dread pooling in his stomach, heavier than lead. Serafina was looking at him. Her hazel eyes were clear now, the fog of the coma lifting. She was staring directly at his face. She wasn't pulling her hand away, but she wasn't holding him either. Her hand felt like an inanimate object against his cheek, warm flesh, but devoid of spirit. "Sarah," Dominic whispered, his voice trembling. Can you hear me? In your mind?" Serafina blinked slowly. She looked at his hand, covering hers, analyzing it like a scientist looking at a specimen. Then she looked back up at his eyes. Her expression was not one of hatred. Hatred would have been a connection. Hatred requires passion. Her expression was one of absolute, terrifying indifference. "I know who you are," she whispered, her voice gaining a fraction more strength. "You are Dominic. I am your mate," he pleaded, pressing harder against her hand, desperate to bridge the gap. "Search for me, Sarah. Look inside. The bond, it must be weak because you're tired. Just look for the gold thread." Serafina closed her eyes for a moment. She took a breath, and Dominic saw a flicker of pain cross her face. Not physical pain, but the confusion of reaching for a limb that had been amputated. She opened her eyes again. The look she gave him shattered his heart into dust. "It's not weak, Dominic," she said softly. "It's gone." "No." Dominic shook his head frantically, the panic rising in his chest, making it hard to breathe. "No, that's impossible. We are fated. The moon goddess paired us. It can't just be gone." "You blocked me," she stated. It wasn't an accusation. It was a fact. She spoke it with the clinical detachment of a doctor reading a diagnosis. "When I was on the floor, when the pain started, I reached for you. I screamed for you with everything I had. I pulled on the bond until it was tight, until it was burning." She paused, her eyes drifting back to the baby, finding comfort in Lucas's face. "And then," she continued, "I felt you shut it. You slammed the door. And when you did that, something snapped. I felt it break, Dominic, like a rubber band pulled too far." Dominic recoiled as if she had slapped him. He pulled his hand back, staring at her in horror. The rejection hadn't been a ceremony. He hadn't needed to recite the ancient words, "I, Alpha Dominic, reject you." He had performed the rejection through action. By denying her plea in her moment of death, by prioritizing politics over the soul bond, he had effectively killed the connection. The biological tie had withered and died from starvation and trauma. "We can fix it," Dominic stammered, the mighty Alpha King reduced to a begging, broken man. "I will fix it. I will woo you. I will court you like we just met. I will spend every day of my life earning it back." Serafina shifted slightly, wincing as her healing muscles protested. She carefully took her hand back from him and wrapped it around Lucas's tiny fist. "You don't understand," she said quietly, looking at the wall. "I don't hate you, Dominic. I don't feel you. Looking at you right now, it's like looking at a stranger who is holding my son." The silence that followed was louder than the flatline had been. "I saved you," Dominic whispered, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. "I gave you my energy. I stayed here for 40 days. And you were absent for the 1 hour that mattered," she countered. Her voice wasn't angry, just tired. "Thank you for saving my life. Thank you for our son." She finally looked at him, and her eyes were dry. "But you can't resurrect what you killed. The wolf inside me doesn't know you anymore." She made a small shooing motion with her hand. "Please, I want to hold my son properly. And your scent, it's distressing him. It smells like guilt." Dominic stood up slowly. His legs felt like they were made of wood. He carefully placed Lucas into the crook of Serafina's arm. He watched as she nuzzled the baby, a soft smile, a smile he used to think was his sole property, gracing her lips. She didn't look at him again. Dominic Blackwood backed away. He stepped out of the circle of light cast by the bedside lamp and retreated into the shadows of the corner. He stood there, a king with a crown of thorns, watching the tableau of mother and child. He had his heir. He had his queen alive. But as he stood in the darkness, the crushing weight of his reality settled on his shoulders. He was alone. He had won the war for her life, but he had lost the war for her heart. The bond was severed, leaving him drifting in the cold, vast ocean of his own making. And as Serafina hummed a soft lullaby to the boy, Dominic realized that his penance was not over. In fact, the true torture had only just begun. This story isn't just about wolves, magic, or fated mates. It is a brutal, grounded reminder of a very human truth. Neglect is a form of rejection. Dominic believed that his title, his power, and his important work justified his silence. He thought the bond was permanent, something that could withstand anything. But he learned the hardest lesson of all. Relationships, even fated ones, are living things. If you starve them, if you lock them out in the cold, they die. Now Dominic faces a fate worse than death. He isn't the villain who gets killed. He is the man who has to live with the woman he loves, seeing her every day, while she looks through him like he is made of glass. And that is the tragic end of this chapter for the Blackwood Pack. This was a roller coaster, and honestly, writing that ending hurt. If this story touched you, or if you felt that cold shiver when Serafina called him a stranger, please hit the like button. It helps the video reach more people who love these kinds of deep, emotional dramas. Now, I have a question for you, and I really want to know your answer in the comments. Is there coming back from this? Can a severed bond be retied with time and effort? Or should Serafina take Lucas and leave the Alpha King to rot in his castle alone? Type Team Second Chance if you think he can earn her love back, or Team Walk Away if you think she deserves a fresh start. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell. Next week, we are starting a new series about a rogue wolf who infiltrates a pack, only to find out the alpha is her long-lost brother. You won't want to miss it. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next video.